Guys, can we just talk about it? Can we talk about it? Can we talk about the AEW World Championship picture and how it's not so great right now? Can we have a discussion about this? I'm not, we need to have an honest conversation person, but I think it's fair to say that a lot of people feel like this AEW Championship picture isn't looking great right now. And I've got some solutions. Some Solulus. Maybe I'm Delulu. But I think that could reroute this world title reign in a really compelling way. Thank you for joining me for this. Please leave a thumbs up on this video. It really helps me out. It does incredible things for people finding me in the algorithm. I've had experiences where I can directly kind of link back that your support is what's driving up my views. So thank you so much for that. I'm also well over 1,500 people subscribed now, and I unfortunately have to thank Tom Campbell in part for that, because he said he'd put my face on a mug if I got to 1,600, and we didn't get there yet. But darn it, if we get to 1,600, I think I can bully him back into it. So let's keep those subscriptions driving right up, and let's dive into the AEW World Championship picture. Before we do, I just want to say, if you dig this, if you're like, I love the Death Riders, this is totally for me, I think that's awesome. I think that if this is something that you think is working and clicking and you're like, yeah, I love these destruction perverts, let's go. I love that. So you are so entitled to your opinion on this channel. Like, this is not a place where I actively and proactively try to stomp out people's love of something. I never want to be that person. So if this is working for you, that's great. I think there's a lot of people that feel like this isn't quite clicking, though. And either way, even if you think this is working, let me know if you think these booking routes would be something that is interesting to you, because I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see what you guys think of this. I don't normally veer into creative content all that much, but I felt like this one's a little bit more warranted. I will also say, I think there has been kind of a hyper criticism on the world title picture right now, and I think it's a little bit earned, but I think it's also due to some other things that are going on in AEW, namely, there's not really stories for any of the titles, and they have a lot of them. In fact, the women's titles are the ones that have the most story around them, but those are kind of predictable, at least the world title picture is. So it really creates an off-kilter balance, and because the world title is supposed to be the most important thing, I think people are really kind of sinking their teeth into, like, let's get ourselves out of this. Danny Garcia doesn't really have any stories built out. He's had contenders that were built out from the C2, but he finally wins this title. He finally climbs the mountain, and then he immediately jumps into a tournament for somebody else's title. He's in the men's casino gauntlet for the world title. What about your title, Danny? I understand we got the cool moment with Wheeler and things like that, but, like, where's the focus on the story for Daniel Garcia? Or even the character arc? Feels like he got thrown back into the C2 to just have a medium performance, right? The tag titles. Glad Private Party is, like, new champions. Excited about that. Think they could do really great stuff. Think they could have a great run. No stories there, really. The international title, I think we see where that's going with Takeshita and Kenny. Like, there's definitely handwriting on the wall with that. But Takeshita won the title. There's been some cool stuff he's done internationally. Some good title defenses, but not really, like, a solid story for Takeshita either. And the trios titles, completely MIA, which is, it's a crime. It's a felony. They should be arrested. They should be arrested for keeping me from being able to see Pac and Claudio and Wheeler Yuta in the ring. Like, come on, man. That's not fair. I deserve that. I deserve that. So, I would say all of the titles have an issue around them, and because there's not really a ton else going on there, that's contributing to people really putting a magnifying glass over what's going on in the world title picture. Let's talk about ways out of this story. Now, the assumption is, and this is just an assumption, we of course don't know full creative plans of anything, but it sure feels like the story that they were setting up was Darby Allin dethroning Jon Moxley, if and when he makes it back, God willing, not trying to be morbid, but realistically, Mount Everest has taken a lot of people's lives. If and when he comes back from that, that it would be the plan to have him dethrone Moxley, whether that's late spring, whether that's all in, whenever. it seems like that's the long game, and I think there's a lot of people that feel like this story can't sustain itself until then. So let's go through some of the alternative options, assuming that that's their plan, right? Let's kick off first and foremost with the one that seems like everybody's the most on board with, and there might be a little recency bias, but I do think it's a really great idea. The Elite have to make amends with Kenny Omega, and Kenny Omega dethrones Jon Moxley. I think there's a lot of money in this. You do have to bridge the gap with a creative effort between the Elite and Kenny Omega, though, because last time we saw them, they tried to, as Alex Pulowski, my frequent host at Fightful, says, they tried to kill Kenny with his own diverticulitis, right? So you have to make amends for that, whether that's saying, like, man, I know that what we did was really messed up, but these guys are ruining the company that we're EVPs of. Like, we have to put aside our differences to do something immediately. Whatever that looks like, there needs to be a creative bridge there that puts these guys back on the same side, back on the babyface side of things. And then have Kenny Omega beat Jon Moxley probably sooner than later. Here's what I like about it. Jon Moxley has been targeting people with egos, especially these young kids in the back. And I think Kenny Omega, being the EVP of the company, or an EVP of the company, should take offense to that. I don't think he's an ego-driven guy. He seems like, as a shoot, one of the most normal guys in wrestling, which is very refreshing. But he should say, who the hell are you to say that about our young growing roster, and come out in defense of that. Because we haven't seen the faces really come out in defense of that. We've seen them come out in defense of themselves, because that's had to feed Jon Moxley's side of the story, right? Jon Moxley's been saying, in the multi-man angle, for example, like, you guys could gang up and beat me, but you guys can't decide who's going to get the pin. So, like, those kind of things makes the faces need to be almost about themselves so that that story works. Kenny Omega can come back and say, I'm an EVP, you've been out of line this whole time, I'm going to beat your ass for that title. And then Kenny Omega gets to have a title run as a babyface while he's healthy. There's some really crucial elements to that. One, he'd be a face. None of the stuff with Don Callis would be going on. Sneaky, snarky, comedically funny Kenny Omega wouldn't be the one going at it. I think Kenny Omega could do wonders for the young guys on this roster, and really help put them over in a way that this angle was intending to, and I don't think is doing productively. So I think Kenny Omega face run could be incredible. I think you could even have face versus face stories with Kenny, because there could be some young guys back there that come out and say, it means so much that you stood up for this locker room because I love it here, whatever. And Kenny says, you know what? You get a world title shot because I appreciate your gratitude and everything you did for this place while I was away, blah, blah, blah. So I think there's a lot of opening for really unique stories. And the other thing is, Kenny was being held together by duct tape when he was on his last title run. And he had a really great title run, but a healthy Kenny Omega right now versus made out of graham crackers Kenny Omega, who needed like 1 million surgeries because he loves wrestling so much. He's like, I'm going to come back from hernia, having no knees, having no shoulders, having no torso, having no insides. I'm going to come back from all of it for you guys. I really think that a healthy Kenny run could be something really, really special. Really, really special. And the list of matches, I mean, it's Kenny Omega. It's Kenny Omega, guys. Like, let him have a healthy, long title run, and then he can drop to Okada at All In, and they could tie back the Elite story if they wanted. Okada could say, I filled in with you while you were out, whatever. Like, there's plenty to play with those Elite relationships. So I think there's plenty of ways to go. So Kenny seems to be the one that everybody's hot on right now, because his comeback is going to swallow the world title picture whole if they don't pivot to him being the world champion, which honestly is something AEW is kind of okay with. Like, if you look on the women's side, I think there's plenty of times that the TBS title has been more of a focus than the women's world title. Like, there's just been situations where a mid-card title doesn't necessarily have to mean a lower prioritized title or a different like lesser story title or whatever. So they might just be fine with that. But Kenny Omega, world champ, seems to be a very viable option in my opinion. The second option is you look at the Death Riders themselves, right? It's only a few guys. I think we need to realistically understand how detrimental this is to the story. And both of the next two ideas kind of focus around that. So, idea number 2 is to have Claudio turn on Mox. I wish it felt like Wheeler Yuta was ready for this, but I don't think it does. Claudio could turn on Mox and say, this whole thing has been about ego. Like you've been talking about wanting to stomp out the egos of the young guys in the back. You haven't done anything except serve your own ego at this point. We can't possibly overcome the numbers of people coming at us continually on this consistent of a basis, and you haven't added anybody to our side of things. We never get to defend our golds. We never get to defend our trios titles. This is all about you. This is all about you and you wanting more TV time and you and your ego. This was a falsified mission statement from the start. Claudio turns on Mox. Claudio has a transitional reign to Darby Allin. The story's been with Darby and Claudio as much as the story's been with Darby and Mox anyway. Darby gets his big moment beating Claudio. Claudio just fucking beats people's asses for like a few months and it fucking rules because Claudio is that dude, okay? If you've never seen the shoe interview of Kevin Owens talking about Claudio, you must. Basically, the premise of the interview is them talking about the wrestler Low-Ki and Low-Ki having a bit of an edge to him, a bit of an attitude, and not really liking Kevin Owens. And Kevin Owens, even 15, 20 years ago, whatever this was, classic KO being like, that's fine. He goes, if you don't like me, that's fine. You don't want to drop your title to me, that's fine. You don't want to fight El Generico, that's fine. But you don't want to fight Claudio Castagnoli? He's a horse. He's a human horse. It's the funniest thing ever because, as the story goes, Low-Ki didn't want to fight to Claudio Castagnoli, who had been champ for well over a year at that point. But they did, and the match was great, so KO has no problem with it. But the way he says he's a horse, he's a human horse, is unreal. It's so funny, but just have Claudio be an absolute machine. Have him wreck everybody until Darby comes back and says, whoa, 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 you're the same agent of destruction that Moxley was, just as one guy instead of a stable. And have Darby still be the guy to dethrone Claudio. Beautiful, clean, easy, done. Cuts off the Moxley stuff is a nice stopgap to get to your original plan of Darby Allin. Busts up the Blackpool Combat Club Death Riders, which is a stable that has been going on too long at this point. I think it could be a really unique way out. And I also think Claudio deserves singles gold, to be quite honest. Like, that guy continues to be one of the best wrestlers in the world. His ROH matches were amazing when he was a world champ. That arrogant dickhead Claudio with the suits and the coffee and the superiority to everybody else that Eddie Kingston hated so much. That guy rules. That guy freaking rules. Get that guy back on my screen, please. I love that dude. So, all for Claudio turning on Mox. I think that could be a really great way to accomplish a lot in a small amount of time without changing your ultimate end goal of making Darby Allin your world champion, if that is where, again, and if this was all intended to go. So the third way, and this is going to be the one that probably surprises people the most, but this is something my frequent host, co-host, whatever, Alex Pulaski, sold me on a while back, and the answer may surprise you. I sound like a newscaster being like, there's a harmful chemical under your sink. What is it? The answer might shock you. But the answer here is actually to double down on this angle, to get more committed to it, because a lot of the issue with this angle is how half-baked, half-assed it has felt. The Death Riders, just 4 guys being able to stave off the entire locker room is unrealistic and bad, and the poor man's takeover of everything has been bad. We're going to take over the Superstation. All they did was cut a promo backstage. Even the Rampage one, where they actually ended the show at least, they just kind of like took out a guy. They're taking out the Midnight Express. They look like the Sticky Bandits from Home Alone. Like, this isn't working because they are not recruiting anybody to their side. So I get that they want to take out the egos of the locker room, but imagine if they had employed FTR and FTR turned heel, because you're telling me Dax Harwood couldn't sell you on, yeah, I think they're a bunch of egotistical little shits, as old school as that guy is. Come on, man, that's sitting right there. But when I was talking about this with Alex Pulowski, who will definitely be on more episodes like this, he had said, like, the Don Callis family is right there. Imagine those heels joining up with these guys. You would actually feel like the AEW locker room is in detriment. Imagine the Hurt Business teaming up with these guys saying, we just got here and we don't like these little snots that are running around. We hurt people, right? We hurt people. Let's hurt people together, right? If you had people declaring sides of this war and then the baby faces at a loss, this would feel like a much more real and threatening angle. This would feel like the umbrella angle that they had promised us at the beginning of this. You cannot kill Bryan Danielson with a plastic bag, unalive him as it were. I'm not monetized yet, so I think I can still say that. You cannot unalive Bryan Danielson with a plastic bag and then go toe in the water on this instead of diving all the way in. You have to divide the locker room, and who comes to unify the faces? Who's been out this whole time? Whose story does this really belong to? Who's a guy that has had issues with Moxley, but has also been his friend? Who's a guy who knew who Claudio was from the beginning, who knew the snake that Claudio was, who's known it for decades? Who's a guy that feels day one as hell? And who's a guy whose promos could level Jon Moxley, who could take him out? Eddie Kingston, cleared or not, comes back to rally the troops on the babyface side. He reunites everyone. Maybe he's not cleared to compete yet, and he doesn't even know if Darby can do it, but he knows that this locker room is something special. He knows he's the guy that I believe there is no Eddie Kingston without AEW, right? Because that's how he came into this company versus Cody Rhodes. It's sitting right there. Eddie Kingston not being on TV as a agent, as a voice for the babyface side. Maybe we're just not there yet, and that is a plan down the line. Eddie Kingston, this is his story. He has issues with the guys on the other side. His mental health kind of wavers with how close he is to the title and how far away he is. That kind of feeds Jon Moxley's ego argument, right? That, like, everybody's so obsessed with this title, I have to put it away. I have to keep it away from you. That's how egotistical you guys are. You guys don't even get to look at it while I'm champion. Eddie Kingston should be apoplectic about that. And also, we know what Eddie can do on the mic. He's one of the most compelling promos in wrestling, and they have tremendous chemistry. People forget about how great their tag run was together, how great the vignettes were together. The story that they told during the pandemic, calling out each other's mamas and stuff. My God, I feel like this is Eddie's story, and it shatters my heart that he's not cleared for it. But cleared or not, I think this is the way to go for sure. But that ends this video, guys. Please leave a thumbs up if you can. Sorry, my monitors just started acting weird right at the end. The Death Riders are taking it over right now, I think, but I appreciate you guys watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and please let me know your thoughts. Do you like the title angle? Do you like what's going on here? Do you like it but think these are 3 satisfactory routes to end it anyway? Do you have other ideas that might be different, that might be a little more clever, stuff that I'm not thinking about yet? Please let me know. Please let me know. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the support you've given me. We are working our way toward monetization. Keep an eye out for my next video where I'm bringing back my 5 Things series. We are going to do a tag team edition for 5 tag teams that are up next. You're going to want to stay tuned for that one. That's going to be a lot of fun. As I'm saying it out loud, it's not my 5 Things series. It's my Up Next series. My 5 Things series is completely different. But it is 5 tag teams. It is 5 tag teams that you're going to want to keep an eye on. This is kind of an underserved conversation right now. I feel like independent tag teams are not something that enough people have their eye on. So very excited about that. Spoiler, the velocities are certainly on it. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.